PFL just had their biggest event of the year, 6 championship fights for the PFL World title, the finale to the season long, the tournament style, the playoffs, the regular season, all that mess just wrapped up. But the PFL just can't get their hand out from under their ass. They can't get the gun off their foot. They keep shooting themselves right in the foot with every last move. They might just have one of the biggest stars in the world in terms of MMA women's fighting. Dakota Ditcheva got a fantastic finish over Tyler Santos. Yes, was it impressive? Absolutely. Was it a great finish? Does she have killer instinct? Yes. Is she dangerous and aggressive? Yes, absolutely. She's fun to watch. Yeah, I'll give her that. But to me, honestly, it looked like Tyler Santos may have thrown the fight. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm just saying. She looked a lot better against Valentina Shevchenko, who's beaten the likes of some good fighters in the UFC. Dakota Ditcheva beat the 2 worst women in the entire PFL tournament. The PFL, even when they're getting something going right, they just can't seem to do it the right way. Okay, so like I said, I just got all that out of the way. But we've been talking about how Bellator fighters cannot seem to get fights. Former champions, expensive fighters that have big contracts in Bellator cannot seem to get good fights in the PFL. The PFL talk about all this stuff, talk a big game about how they're the best promotion, how they treat the fighters better than anybody. The UFC is terrible and we are coming for their spot. Well, they decided to pay out millions to the hip-hop star Nav. Now, this guy is of Middle Eastern descent of some sort, and they were over in, Saudi Arabia competing at these events, right? All these fighters went out to Saudi Arabia. They put on the event in Saudi Arabia. They had this guy with Middle Eastern descent come out to Saudi Arabia, put on a performance in the middle of the card. This costs money, but yet you don't have enough money to pay Patricio Pitbull, Corey Anderson, Chris Cyborg, Vadim Nemkov, AJ McKee, all these guys, all these champions, Patchy Mix, Leandro Higo. You're not giving them any notice on any kind of fights? Absolutely ridiculous how stupid the PFL seems to be in their business choices. Patricio Pitbull, one of the best Bellator fighters of all time, one of the best fighters outside of the UFC ever, featherweight GOAT outside of the UFC. He says, this is cool and all. Good luck to all the fighters involved from last Friday. Now, when will we know anything about Bellator MMA right now? It's kind of in limbo. There's an event coming up in January against Usman Nurmagomedov and Paul Hughes. Vadim Nemkov has been announced for a fight on that card. However, his opponent that was announced has just gone under the knife for surgery, so that's not even going to happen despite the announcement. Let's take a look at what Patricio is referring to.
PFL. Welcome to the toughest test.
There he is. Jake Paul himself appears in a, 2-minute clip explaining the rules of the PFL tournament, of the season format, of the playoff style, of the championship fights. Jake Paul is quite the expensive character. They've signed deals with Francis, who received about 15 to 20 million to not only fight, but to also be the chairman of PFL Africa and to represent fighters from Africa in some sort of sense. That's a lot of money. And Jake Paul, he doesn't come cheap. And they've likely paid out a couple $100,000 for him to film this 2-minute video. Yet you still can't pay your biggest fighters, Patricio Pitbull, AJ McKee, Corey Anderson, Patchy Mix, Gegard Mousasi. Any of these ring a bell? Yeah, they're former champions that get a lot of money in Bellator. They have big Bellator contracts. The PFL picked up Bellator, and now they can't get these guys to fight because they don't have the money to pay these guys. And yet I'm supposed to believe that this is an organization that is legitimate. I'm supposed to believe this is a major organization. I'm supposed to believe that this is an organization worthy of my respect and my attention? Absolutely not. Forget about it. Let me not even just mention this. Many of these fighters do not come from PFL directly. We've got Brendan Loughnane, a former Dana White Contender Series alum, wanted to be in the UFC, was a UFC reject, found his way into the PFL, made some money, good for him. Dakota Ditcheva, one of their only PFL homegrown athletes. Impa Kasanganay, former UFC fighter. Umalatov, Musayev, Where do they really come from? We'll get into that in just a second. Brent Primus, Bellator fighter. Gadzi Rabadanov, Bellator fighter. Oleg Popov, Denis Goltsov. You can find heavyweights anywhere. Let's look into it. The guy who beat Brendan Loughnane in the main event was Timur Hizriev, okay? Fighting out of Russia, trains with Khabib and them, all that group over there in Dagestan. Guess where he comes from? That's right, it's right here. PFL World Champion right here. Here's the proof. Fought Brendan Loughnane. Where's he come from? Bellator. This isn't a PFL signee. This guy came straight from Bellator. Gadzi Rabadanov defeated Brent Primus, another Bellator alum. Where does he come from? Oh, it looks like Bellator. What a shock in that one. And then finally, Dovletsan Yagshamordov ran over Impa Kasanganay very easily. Guess where he comes from? Yeah, that's right, Bellator. None of these guys, aside from 1, 2, Musayev, are from PFL originally, where they were homegrown and bred to be solid fighters. I don't care about Goltsov and Popov. They fucking suck. Get over it. Popov, Goltsov, the winner of that, are going to fight Francis Ngannou. Don't give two fucks about it, okay? That's the end of the story. Tyler Santos, former UFC fighter. What are we doing here, PFL? You've got nothing. You are worth nothing. Your business model is terrible. Let's pay rappers, let's pay Jake Paul, and let's pay Francis Ngannou all the money in the world. Now, Francis, to his credit, deserves it, no doubt. But you've got a lot of champions that are not getting fights, and it's unacceptable in terms of what a true major martial arts organization should be putting out there. This is just pathetic from the PFL. Yet these guys over to the UFC, they wanted to stop the UFC from having the monopoly on MMA, but guess what? They're just feeding into it. Corey Anderson, Patricio Pitbull, AJ McKee, Leandro Higo, Patchy Mix, all these guys are just going to hop right over into the UFC. Amasov was recently released. Logan Storley's deal is up. I mean, this is fucking crazy. These guys are absolutely stupid. They do not know how to run a mixed martial arts business. They are catering to business partners. They are trying to make money off of the fighters because of the TV deals, and there's nothing you can say otherwise to convince me. Please, somebody like Don Davis, reach out to me, speak to me, and let me know the truth, because there is no truth. It's only what you pretend to spew. You say that you don't have a favorite MMA fight of all time. Really? How can you be the owner of a PFL and an MMA organization as such, and you've never even watched MMA? You do not like to watch MMA. You do not have a favorite MMA fight. I could pop off 20 MMA fights that are better than anything you could come up with off the top of your head, because you're an absolute fool. You and Peter Murray both are doing this to exploit the fighters, to exploit their lives, and to make money off of their good names.